Hey, everybody. Welcome to this bonus episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 154, with Elliot Felix, talking about his recently released book, How to Get the Most Out of College. He brings a wealth of experience and knowledge and input from interviews that he did for the book, and this is a really great conversation to help equip higher professionals and the students they work with the great research and insights of how to get the most out of college. There's a lot that goes into that, and the tagline that I'm so glad has come up in this episode and others recently is that it matters less where you go, just what you do while you go there on whatever campus you're at or while you study online. So really appreciate Elliot's time and all that he shared. Some great stuff to check out in the show notes as well. So definitely go take a look there and connect with Elliot to keep the conversation going. Go check out his book. But without further ado, after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 154, a bonus episode with Elliot Felix.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
So today we are exploring the student experience in the sense of how do students kind of make meaning out of their experience and navigate the complex systems of higher education successfully. There's a lot of kind of discourse, obviously, it's been going on for years around, how do we support students just kind of broadly and help them make the most of their experience. So super excited to talk all about that today. And, we'll start out as we always do. Elliot, if you want to just introduce yourself quickly and give a brief overview of your professional background and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. I'm happy to, Dustin, and excited to be here. I think one of the reasons I'm excited to be here is I'm also a higher ed geek and an education geek more broadly. And I geek out on this, I think, from a couple of different perspectives. One is as a dad of young kids and thinking about how to help them be creative and thinking about AI and automation and not, turn them into little calculators. I also come to it as a student. I was trained and educated in architecture at UVA and MIT, and I tried when I was a student to be an advocate for my fellow students and trying to improve the experience, on student government, doing lots of different projects and sessions and surveys. And I'm occasionally a professor. I try and join a few classes each semester as a guest speaker and help students with connecting how their classes might relate to a career and trying to be a bridge between education and practice. And finally, I geek out on education as the founder of Bright Spot Strategy. That's a company that's on a mission to create more engaging, equitable, sustainable experiences for students. And I've been lucky enough to be a consultant to more than 100 colleges and universities, helping them create a better student experience, attract and retain students by improving their spaces, their support services, the technology. And it might be thinking about their classrooms, their instructional design, their technology support, so learning can be more interactive. It might be about bringing together a bunch of different student services to make them more visible and accessible to students. It might be about reimagining libraries to be a student success hub where you can not only study for a test or write a paper, but get help on the writing or get help visualizing data or get help fabricating a prototype or even talk to a career advisor about how that project might be positioned in your portfolio and how that could lead to an internship. So lots of different ways to geek out on higher ed, and excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love it. Because I mean that's that passion, the interest, and kind of deep diving on stuff is certainly the name of the game here. And I think the work that you do kind of consulting and building up the systems and kind of infrastructure on the institution side for, that's going to be conducive to supporting student success, I think is a big part of it. And then the other part of it is, we need to help students kind of have the roadmaps to understand the resources that are available to them and how to sort of maximize the potential of all of this that is available to them. So we're going to be kind of locking into that perspective of, helping to kind of inform the kind of working philosophies and things of hired professionals, and doing that through really kind of walking a mile and the shoes of today's students and everything. But you kind of have some collateral, some content here on this topic that you've done recently, writing a book exploring how just tips for students to be successful in college and everything. So I'll let you you could explain it better than I can. What is the book exactly, and how did it come to be?
Well, the book is called How to Get the Most Out of College, and I can say coming up with the title was the hardest part of the whole thing. It took about 6 months to write, and practically several months to really settle on the title as I was writing it. But the idea was, in my consulting work, I saw lots of recurring themes and lots of needs on the parts of students to belong, to better access and understand and take advantage of the support services that might be available to them, whether it's about information or data or technology or advising, needs to understand how their classes connect to a career path, and seeing that there's a lot of inequity in the system. And I thought I could share the lessons I've learned from this consulting and do it in a way that helps level the playing field. That's particularly helpful for students that maybe don't have the information or don't have an advocate, and so maybe can't take full advantage of what their college or university has to offer. And so I looked around at what was already there, and there's a lot of great information there, but I did see kind of a gap. It seemed like, when you look at the things that are there about college, and I came to find out that, at least on Amazon, this is called academic development counseling. That's the category that the book is in. Mm. Things tend to either be about before or after you go, before, during, or after. So getting in, choosing a college, and then a little bit about while you're there, and then a little bit about the career, but very little that bridges those three. And then they also seem to either be serious and quite dense, or they were quite social, how to get along with your roommate. And a lot of them didn't really have the student voice. Also, some were kind of in taking the shortcut camp. How can I get through college doing as little as possible, which didn't sound like a great thing to me. So I was really trying to fill that gap with something that bridges before and after, that's both talks about academics and career and social, and that showcases the stories of students to help other students. And my background is in design. I started off as an architect, and I found my way into strategy consulting because I realized that we didn't know enough as architects about the people we were designing for. I wanted to learn more, and then realized that changing their space alone wasn't going to solve all the problems we were uncovering from the surveys and the interviews and the focus groups. So that was kind of the impetus to start Bright Spot, and I tried to apply that design background to writing the book. For instance, testing it out and like prototyping it on social media. So I started with a post a day and saw what was resonating with people in terms of length and format and subject area. And the fun part was, after a couple of months, I ran out of steam. I ran out of the studies and the evidence and the lessons that I knew, which was a great sign to go talk to other people. And so then I conducted lots of interviews with other experts, and put that all together and got lots of feedback from a sort of an informal advisory board of students and faculty and staff across higher ed, and revised it, and it came out in February.
Yeah, and congrats. Yeah, months of work, you said, and yeah, just talking to all these folks, and yeah, because I think it is great, like how you came at it, where it's like the best of all those worlds of like not being, because it's like the books that I read in my grad program about like, well, all the research, and it's just like a big tome of, numbers and figures and charts and whatever, and the theories and everything. It's like all that is important, but if you can kind of mash it up and synthesize it all together around, personal anecdotes and the interviews, talking with experts, looking at the research, and then, certainly just your own unique perspective and thoughts and takes and expertise. Yeah, and I'm also impressed, and I don't know if like, 'cause I'm always curious with these things, like because the kind of subtitle is that it has like 127 ways. I'll read 127 ways to make connections, to make it work for you, and make a difference, in relation to how to get the most out of college. So, was there a reason why you chose 127?
Great question. It's really the magic number. No, the way I had landed on 127, which I do like as a number, which is, we can geek out on numbers too, but it's a prime number. They add up to 10. It's it's kind of it's odd, which is I think good. It's good to be odd, but the way I landed there is, as I was writing the book, the structure emerged, and that is to have three sections. The first is like a know before you go, understanding yourself and understanding your college options. And a lot of that is taking this design perspective. In order to design something, you need to know who you're designing for. So and that's you, that's the student. So you have to start there. And so there were 2 chapters there, 5 to 10 tips each. And then the middle section covers the common facets of college life, classes, career path, campus, clubs, and community, technology. And there's 5 to 10 or so tips for each of those. And then the third section, which is really where I was learning from and leaning on so many great experts, is a chapter for each different aspect of student identity. And it's not comprehensive, but it's a good place to start. And it covers first gen students, LGBTQ plus students, students with disabilities, students with children, students of color, international students, veterans, transfer students, student athletes. And so when you look at those 17 chapters and you have 5 or 10 each tips, you end up with around 127. And that seemed like a good place to stop for now, and get it out and get it into the hands of students and families, and coaches and counselors, and faculty, staff, administration within higher ed.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly kind of where I wanted to go next. But I think like I always think of, because so much of it, like you said, like just settling on the title. There's maybe some back and forth there, and then like like what number should it be? Because like it could be like, well, I did 127. Then what if somebody does 128? Then it's like whatever. But yeah, that all makes sense. It's a good figure there. It may seem as though this isn't immediately relevant or applicable to faculty, staff, the folks who have already gone through college and are now working there. But I think it is such a great resource that could be shared with their students, or just, again, being able to kind of think again back to that time when you were a student and, maybe navigating things on your own. But life has also changed a lot, for today's students and everything from how they were before. So what is your take on how you think this book applies to hired professionals? Like how do you envision maybe them using it?
Yeah, it's a great question, because they're one of the 3 audiences I had in mind: students and families and coaches and counselors, and then higher ed folks. And I think, if you're in student affairs, or you're working in the library, or you're a faculty member, or you're part of the senior administration, I think the first use case is that how to get the most out of college can be inspiration for you to provide the kinds of classes, support services, community, career paths that students are looking for. So it's basically a yardstick you can use to see how you're measuring up, and maybe it will reveal some gaps, some opportunities. For instance, one of the real themes in the book is belonging, and one of the things that maybe encompasses, when you add them all up, there's quite a bit on different identity centers, on the Pride Center, on the First Gen Center, on the Student Athlete Center, on the Transfer Center, because these are such important places on campus and online for students to find community, to access resources. So maybe you read this book and you say, gosh, how are we doing on our identity centers? Or, another big theme of the book is helping students ask for help and advocate for themselves and get all sorts of different help, whether it's writing a paper or talking to a counselor. And there's a lot of research on the efficacy of visibility and bringing together different student services. So if you work for a college or university, maybe you take a hard look at how your services are organized digitally and physically, and look to make them more successful. So I think it's a tool for inspiration, evaluation, assessment. I think secondly, it can be a direct resource for the folks that are working directly with students. So if you work on the first year experience, if you work in a student success center, if you work in an advising center or career services, this is something you could actually give to students. It's something you could review with students. They could do some reading. They could do some homework. That you could use it for the curriculum or the roadmap for a first year seminar, for instance. So those are the two things I thought about: indirectly as inspiration and evaluation, and directly as a resource in the work with students.
Yeah, like a first year seminar, like those sort of venues that would be just really applicable to have this as a sort of a guidebook, sort of a workbook that you can all right, we're focusing on these things, we'll discuss them, try to put them into motion and those sort of things. So like you have like the reflection piece, that could be added in with the book as kind of the guide. So what do you think, with all of this being said, what do you think most people misunderstand about kind of the college going experience right now? Because I think oftentimes, whether it's policymakers or, leadership at institutions, like they're reflecting a lot on what their experience was like, and sometimes kind of just shooting from the hip and kind of making decisions that way. So like, this book, again, it kind of has that benefit where it's like, okay, this is sort of like the current state of things and how students are, navigating things and making decisions about what to do and how to do it. So I think it could help kind of demystify certain things. But I don't know if you found, maybe from like your discussions with students where they felt as though people didn't fully understand what it's like to be a college student right now.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of that, and there's definitely people making decisions based on an N of one, their own experience decades ago. And I do think a lot of folks, misunderstand who today's students are, and where there's a tension between today's students and what they need and what they expect, versus what's been happening, or what the traditions are. But I think I see a few things. So one is that who are today's students are, and what do they need, and maybe more broadly, how does higher ed sit within an external economic, demographic, technological context. I think, for instance, the job of being a college student is just much more complicated and stressful, than it was years ago. And one statistic I can't get over is the work of Raj Chetty, Opportunity Insights, finding that 30 years ago, you had an 80% chance of having a better life, a better standard of living than your parents, and now that's down to a 50-50 shot. So just that plus the increase in cost means that it really shouldn't surprise anyone that today's students are more cost conscious than they're more career focused. And even though there are lots of studies like the Georgetown Center for Education in the Workforce finding that, hey, a liberal arts degree does pay off in the end, and it just takes a few years to catch up to a STEM degree. Some people don't have that luxury. They can't wait for 5 years to have a lower salary. They've got bills to pay, loans to pay. So I think that external context has changed a lot, and that's something that folks get wrong. But I think more specifically in the book, there are three things that I tried to do to address what I saw as common misunderstandings about what it means to be a college student and what the experience is like. One is, I think we have the wrong story in higher ed. We're telling ourselves that higher ed is something to navigate, which, though it can feel like one, I get that. Imagining college as an obstacle course is the wrong way to think about it. It's too passive, it's too negative, it's too generic. I think it's much better to think about college as something you create, you take charge of, you customize, rather than just passively navigate. And so that's really the big idea in the book, is every student is a designer of their own experience. And the 127 tips in the book, those are the building blocks to create it. I think the second misconception is people think about classes, social activities, career as separate. But the more you can connect those, the better off you are, because then you have that feeling of belonging. You find your people. You also are more likely to find your purpose and a sense of career path. So instead of thinking of those things separately, maybe a group of students do a group project together, and that's a chance to work together, make friends, discover a career path. Maybe it's they do a marketing campaign for a local nonprofit. Maybe it even leads to an internship. And I think then the third misconception is it's not where you go, it's how you go. I think we focus as a country way too much on where you go to college, not how you go to college. And my book is really trying to put that how right front and center, so that students, with the help of family, friends, advisors, they can make those everyday decisions that help them learn, that help them grow, that help them belong, that help them succeed.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I exactly say all the time, is like, it matters less where you go, but just that you go to college and then what you do while you're there. And I think my hope with trying to implore people with that like concept is that, yeah, like it frees you up from being like, oh, well, I'm just going to my like local public school, like merp merp. It's like, no, I mean, it's incredible that you are there and that you have this experience and, all of the options and things that can come from it. And yeah, I think that's also like a good sort of pivot that you were saying as well about like, this is almost like the recipe for how to like, yeah, like how to get the most out of college. Like it's not like this is how you survive or something like this like treacherous, like, sort of obstacle course, as you called it. Like, yeah, like this is what you would hope every student can do and experience while they're at college and everything. And I think just to kind of keep flowing on this topic, like what I wanted to ask too, because I think you were kind of getting there too, is like, so great, students read this, they've got, reference points for how they're going to build, have those building blocks of, experience at college where they're getting, yeah, the career network and friends and, purpose and all these sort of things. So like, what do you see are like the outcomes, the impacts, on kind of the campus environment or things like that? Because I think it's all of that probably resonates and makes a lot of sense. Everything that we've covered so far of like, yeah, we want students to have that belonging and all those sort of things. That is what we aspire towards as hired professionals and everything. But I'm just imagining that there is a, even further sort of like, I've started to like hate that I just always go to this, but like the ROI of like, of like investing in this, because it's like, you can't always like measure the things that matter. But, yeah, I guess just your thoughts on that, of like, sort of like how this sort of manifests and feels, and how you sort of see, students getting the most out of college, and what that sort of, yeah, like the end product of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is complex, and you can't always measure what matters. That's absolutely the case, and lots of times people get caught with measuring the things that are the easiest to measure. Like we in our consulting work, we find people when we're talking about somebody's campus, they're absolutely trying to get uh, the most efficient use of as possible of their classrooms. Meanwhile, their offices, which is usually 2 to 3 times, sometimes 4 times as much office space on a campus as there are classrooms, those are sitting empty. Especially now, and it's
Mm.
just that it's very easy to measure the classroom utilization because you just get a report from the scheduling system, and it's very difficult to measure the offices. So I do think people some are measuring what's easiest to measure at times, but I also think uh, students have loans to pay, and if you think about that shift in um, from an 80% to a 50-50 shot, I think it's only natural for people to be looking for the ROI. And the way I think about this is there's a who, there's a where, there's a what, and there's a how of college. And we've been focusing a lot on the where, which is good. That's important. But as we just talked about, the how is pretty important too. I think recently there's a lot of emphasis on the what, which is great in terms of what to study, the program of study. And there's all this great data from the college scorecard that talks about salary after graduation, and there's at least three that I've seen: the Third Way, Mike Itzkowitz study, the Georgetown study, the Bipartisan Policy Center, all looking at the ROI by program, and I think that's really important. Probably not as the first step to think about, I'm going to look at the ROI of a particular major to figure out what to study, but more, I'm going to think about my interests and then check that against the program at the schools I'm going to. So I think that those are well covered. I think the who part is a great way to get at ROI, because thinking about who you are and who you want to become, that's what helps you set the goals. And I think the best way to measure ROI is relative to your goals and what you value. And then the last is the how part, and that's what the book is about. The book is, how do you make these everyday decisions? What should I do my class project on? What club should I get involved in? What internship should I do an internship, and if so, how and where and why, and how could I do a service learning project that makes an impact on the community? These are the everyday decisions that really add up to you getting the most out of college and getting the value. And there's good research behind these things. I mean, some of the studies I found, there's a 7% wage premium for student leaders. Having led a student organization, or they're going to make 7% more coming out of college. Found other studies that service learning projects where you're doing something in the community, those are associated with about a 6K salary bump. Um, Doing a co-op, those are associated with also about a 6K salary bump. So I think when we're thinking about ROI, we should think about the who, the where, the how, and the what together, and not just focus on the where and the brand and the easy things to measure.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's one of those things I think would help motivate people to expand those opportunities. Sometimes like there are just very few opportunities for students at a particular campus to do like a alternative spring break or something. So it's like, okay, how can we like invest in these things that we know are like really high impact and allow for more students to have the option, the potential to get the most out of college and everything. And I think like, because I guess I wanted to kind of head in that direction, because I think, some aren't, but it's sort of easy to try to get started with it, of the idea of like, well, yeah, if you start really expanding these opportunities for the things that we know work really well to create meaningful experiences for students, like you're probably going to see, you know, higher retention or student satisfaction, because they, everything's kind of clicking and working, and they have a sense of belonging, and um, they're working towards finding their purpose and passions and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think knowing too, in addition to that, some of those easy quantitative measures that people might think of first, there's also all these other great long-term sort of career and kind of gainfully employing benefits as well, which yeah, I mean, is really important. Like that is not the only purpose of why colleges exist, is to just like get people good jobs. It's like, but that's a big part of it, like especially now, just with so many people going, like it is such a great, uplifting force. And as long as we do, help informed students make the right decisions about where to go to study what and all of that, and pay a price that works well for them, and get funding from different sources and things like that. So there's so much to it, but yeah, I mean, just having more informed students, there's a laundry list of benefits, and I'm uh, very grateful to see folks in a lot of different ways putting energy into making that a reality, helping students to be more informed about their college choices. And then just, I remember that being like a kind of key economic concept. Like, you have to make choices, and there's like sort of opportunity cost. So it's like, okay, if I've got this book, it's going to show me, what I should do and why, and all those sort of things. So obviously, we have your book. We will link out to that in the show notes. But if there's other stuff that maybe helped inspire things for the book that you'd want to give a shout out to, or just other stuff that's grabbing your attention, always just like to put in some stuff in the show notes for folks to check out.
One of the best parts of the book was the opportunity to talk to so many other great experts, and it's hard to do, decades or a career of work justice, in a single tip of on a single page. So I think people can use the book as a way to get introduced if they're not already familiar with lots of the other folks I talk to, and so those are great resources, like Dr. Terrell Strayhorn at Virginia Union University and the College Transition Collaborative. Those were two great resources on belonging. I was lucky enough to speak with Dr. Shante White at the Institute for Women's Policy Research on student parents. They have a great initiative there. NASPA has the Center for First Gen Student Success, and I talked to Diana Weintraub Stafford from there. I talked to Bill Carter about student athletes from Student Athlete Insights. So those are all great resources to check out. I think a couple of the other things that come to mind, I just read a fantastic 3-part story about student parents in Teen Vogue that I think is just great to check out if people are trying to understand who today's students are. And it's either 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 students are have children, which I think is the kind of stat that surprises lots of folks. I'm a big fan of this podcast. I'm also, so they could check out this podcast, but they already are. So in addition to that, I would say there's a great podcast called How to First Gen, which is by and for first gen students, and that's a fantastic window into that experience. Not too long ago, they had this amazing episode on kind of pros and cons of living on versus off campus, socially, financially. And I guess the last resource that comes to mind is all these great new studies on the ROI by program of study or major. The Third Way won, the Georgetown won the Bipartisan Policy Center. So that's what comes to mind. But my hope is that people can use the bibliography in the book, because there's, I think, about 300 different studies in there, and they can use that to go deeper if they want.
Yeah, honestly, pro tip, I do that often. Great. Yeah, well, I'll try at least for some of the folks you name dropped, see if I can pull up some websites or whatnot to share out. But as we end the episode, always just love to give an opportunity for a final thought or call to action to wrap everything up. But yeah, I mean, we've covered so much so far and have made some really great points, but yeah, happy to kind of give you the floor to end the episode here.
Well, this is great. And I guess I'll end by saying two things. One is that, while we've been talking about the problems in higher ed and the challenges of adjusting to today's students and rethinking traditions and enabling belonging, I'm incredibly optimistic about higher education. I think it's a fantastic place to uncover who you are and find your place, find your people, learn about something of interest, find your purpose, find your path. So while I think there's things that we can do better, I also think it's pretty damn great. And this is a chance, I think, to make it even better. And secondly, I think the way to do that, you referenced the subtitle of the book. That's kind of my advice in a nutshell. And the first is for people to make connections, between their classes, their activities, have this kind of connector mindset, which, I'm a bit biased. That kind of gets bred into you in design, but I think it's very healthy for people to make these connections so that a class relates to a club, relates to a career path, and connect with people as well. I think then to make a difference, to look to apply that to help in the community. You can be a peer mentor, you can do a service learning project, and you can make it work for you, which I think has a lot to do with advocating for yourself, and really taking full advantage of what the college and university offers for you. Which, I get that can be challenging, and there's lots of reasons why people don't feel like they can. And I hope this informs and empowers and inspires them when they can. So let's celebrate all that's great about going to college, and let's make it even better with the right information and the right opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely agree, because I think like we know a lot about what the stuff that you write about in this book. Like, it's just continuing to sort of bold, underline, and add additional sort of depth and color and context and all of that. So yeah, for hired professionals out there, if they read through this and just feel that much more inspired and motivated to expand access to the great opportunities that college can provide. And yeah, I mean, I geek out about higher ed. I'm optimist in all aspects of my life, and certainly feel that way about higher ed, where I think we have a lot to reckon with, and things will continue to be sort of turbulent, but we will persevere, and I think come out of it, come out of this sort of stormy phase that is starting to clear a bit, which, with that much more of a commitment to all the stuff that we know works really well, and being more student-centered. And yeah, so I'm excited to see what is to come for higher ed on the horizon. And I mean, just thank you so much for jumping on the show and for writing this book and sharing out all this great advice, and just really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dustin. I appreciate yours as well. And one thing I'll just mention in closing is the reason for the book is certainly for me to share what I've learned and to give back. And one of the ways that's really important to me in doing that is that the book has a buy one, give one model. So for every copy we sell, we're donating to a student in need. So we're obviously we're interested in people purchasing books, but we're also interested in recommendations as to where we can donate copies. And Alinea Learning.com is the publisher, and they're taking suggestions on the book page. So so we're excited about that part of the mission, and helping students make the most of their experience and get the most out of college.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a great. You had the final thoughts, and now a call to action for folks to end the episode with. And I think that's it's a great model, and just that idea where it's like, yes, please, like if we can get this in the hands of as many students as possible through folks purchasing it, and then the donations and everything, that would be incredible. So yes, go check out the book. Like I said, it'll be linked out in the show notes. And again, thank you so much, Elliot.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.